Hello, warrior feminist sisters in Alloa. All of you. Okay, I'm Belstaffie, and I'd like to thank you for inviting me to talk today about Holbeck on-street prostitution, and in particular my specialism, which is punters. Okay, I'm going to start off with language. Okay, and language is imperative in our fight for being women, in our fight against transgenderism, but also in our fight against gaslighting in online prostitution. The terms sex work and sex worker, that is a gaslighting term, and it's the language of pimps, punters, and traffickers. Yeah, and it's meant to deliberately conceal and obscure sexual slavery. The term prostituted woman is the term exited women from prostitution use to describe this trade, and out of respect for them, it's the language that I'm going to employ. Sex work gives the illusion of agency and respectability to an evil trade that it doesn't deserve. When I talk about the prostituted women and girls in Holbeck, when I refer to girls, I really do mean girls. A lot of them were under 18, okay? There are a number of very young teenagers who are being prostituted in Holbeck who are often runaways from local children's care homes. The youngest ones I saw when I was there were around 14 and 15 years old, and despite their wild black crack eyes and heavy makeup, you could still see the acne under their foundation. Punters. By punters, I mean the men who buy or coerce sexual abuse from prostituted women and girls with the offer of money. In my 7 years' involvement against the managed approach, including staying there for 3 weeks in 2020, conducting covert surveillance of the real situation there, at no time did I ever see or have cause to complain about female punters. They were all male. Why did I choose Holbeck to attack the sexual exploitation of women and girls who were prostituted, not, for instance, Manchester or Bradford, which was nearer to me? I chose Holbeck because Leeds City Council imposed the managed approach to on-street prostitution, which was deliberately marketed to provide a pioneering and compassionate safe zone for prostituted women who could solicit without fear of prosecution. It was implemented, promoted, endorsed, and supported by the Labour Leeds City Council and West Yorkshire Police in a Safer Leeds partnership. Leeds City Council heralded it as the first safe cure-all for the Leeds problem with on-street prostitution, but a managed approach in Ipswich had been discontinued due to serial woman killer Stephen Wright, who is now serving a whole life sentence for the murders of 5 prostituted women in the Ipswich managed approach to on-street prostitution back in 2006. Within a year of sanctioning the managed approach to on-street prostitution in Leeds, a punter lured a trafficked prostituted woman, Daria Pionko, onto some waste ground within the managed approach, robbed her and kicked her to death with his steel toe-cap boots. She died later in hospital because of the injuries she had sustained from his attack. No one heard Daria scream because the managed approach is a tiny area on a deserted land late at night where there's no one there. She died because no one heard her scream. After Daria Pionko's murder, all the prostituted women moved up into the residential areas for safety reasons. At least there, someone would hear you scream and report your screams to the police as a noise complaint, if nothing else. Within a year, the notion of a safe zone for decriminalising prostitution had encouraged and enabled the murder of a young woman. Within a year, Holbeck was turned upside down by the constant influx of punters from all over the country and abroad. It became an absolute hub for, it was a machine, it became a machine. Effectively decriminalising prostitution in the managed zone in Leeds led to the neighbouring residential areas of Holbeck to become an international hub for on-street prostitution, human trafficking, and the associated Class A drug trade of crack and heroin in equal measures. There were condoms, soiled underwear, needles, piles of excrement, toilet paper, and other drugs paraphernalia all over the parks, in people's gardens, and on the way to school. Kids were stepping over stuff. The refuse of the sex industry. Holbeck was renamed Hellbeck by the Holbeck residents because it wasn't safe to live a normal family life there, raising children. Women could not go out at night because they were relentlessly sexually harassed by punters, curb crawling them at all times of the day, at all times of the night, every day and every night. This went on 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. It wasn't time restricted like the council made out. It never was. Schoolgirls in school uniforms were being propositioned for sex by paedophiles on foot and in cars, and schoolboys were being propositioned by prostituted women and girls for sex for their sweet money. There were anecdotal reports that young women had been abducted from the streets of Holbeck by groups of men in vans claiming that they thought these women had been prostitutes, so they were fair game. None of these men were ever charged with any criminal offence, let alone joint enterprise, kidnap and rape, which in my book are the most serious offences in law. I decided to write my article, Holbeck, Drowning, Not Swimming, to have exposed what was really happening in Holbeck to the residents, the prostituted women and girls. I used my qualifications and experience as a sex offender specialist to draw particular focus onto the men who paid to sexually abuse women and girls, because that analysis was missing. The article was to provide a plan to forward focus on the punters. The ultimate aim was to drive their numbers down, visiting Holbeck's residential area. I was hearing the voices of residents and the exited women from prostitution, but the insights from the punters was completely missing. They wouldn't talk to me. I therefore secreted myself onto popular online punter websites to monitor Holbeck, Leeds, to gather intelligence from their perspectives. What I read was very useful and very insightful, but equally disturbing, was such their misogyny, classism, and racism. Spending years collating intelligence from Holbeck, watching and listening intently, I decided to direct my efforts into targeting the punters by exposing them online with local residents group and contributing to the Punter of the Week initiative. Thank you. It meant spending evenings and nights at all times in Holbeck, working with the street angels, ringing the curb crawlers into the police, and then detailing these men online on the Save Our Eyes residents group to act as a deterrent to others who would do the same. I know that punters were following my account because we had a premier footballer in our sights and he blocked me. So I was aware that punters were watching my site because of my involvement. Yeah, I terrified them. Punters are literally terrified at being exposed for the sadistic, perverted, unconvicted sex offenders that they really are. Many are married, socially very successful men in high-status jobs, company cars, often with child seats in the back. There were men also using works vehicles. White vans featured a lot on the radar for curb crawling. The last punter that I caught with Holbeck Street Angels and filmed was using a milk van. We reported him for curb crawling, and he was apprehended by the police with a known prostituted woman in the van. We watched all this. I was very happy that the police let her go, and they took his details and everything. And it was brought to my attention that he worked for a local milk, I would say the group, agency. I contacted his employers, told them what we'd done, what he'd done, and he lost his job as that. Yeah. Result, yeah? That went all over the internet, and that was my intention, is expose them. They can't deal with it. That's what I did. The punters were all from all ethnicities, and their social class and position in society was often reflected in the vehicles that they were caught curb crawling in. The majority of men picking up prostitutes in Holbeck were in their 30s and 60s, between 30 and 60. Many of these vehicles stand out in Holbeck, as Holbeck is one of the most deprived areas in Leeds. If you're lucky to have central heating in your rented home, you need to be minted to put it on. In Holbeck, that sums up the disparity of wealth and power nicely. When caught by the police for curb crawling in Holbeck's residential area, one man vomited all over himself and his car and had a panic attack. He was kindly driven home to his wife in a police van, and the situation was explained to her. Result. On-street prostitution is about the exploitation of the most vulnerable women and girls in this country, whether they're born here or they're trafficked in. That was evidenced by actually spending weeks watching these men drive around and round for hours. They were seeking out the most vulnerable, the most derelict, and the most emaciated. Why? Because these were sadists who actually really got the managed approach to prostitution. They were gods in Holbeck's hell, and they could do anything. Using my experience as a sex offender specialist and a radical feminist, I did everything within my power to deter these men from visiting Holbeck to sexually abuse and rape trafficked, prostituted, drug-addicted, vulnerable women and teenage girls, most of whom who have mental health problems as well. Whereas Holbeck had always been the top hit on punter websites for on-street prostitution, since the permanent closure of the managed approach, it has plummeted to around number 20. Reports from punters in Holbeck on these sites are now about the massive police presence in Holbeck, and those accounts are legitimate. Some of the accounts before about punters commenting on that weren't. That was me pretending to be a punter to frighten them all. Sex work isn't work. What I've seen happening in Holbeck will stay with me for the rest of my life. The decriminalisation of prostitution favours men and sadistic, scummy men alone. Don't let your government in Scotland or your councils introduce systems of managed approaches to on-street prostitution, peddled to you as safe and compassionate. Prostitution for women and girls is always the opposite of safe and compassionate. If it were safe and compassionate, then these men actually wouldn't bother, and that really, really concerned me. I would like to thank the following women for supporting my efforts in Holbeck. Fiona Broadfoot, campaigner against prostitution. Herself an exited woman from prostitution, and my friend, I'd like to thank the Holbeck Street Angels, mixed-sex residents group, who allowed me to work with them to drive down the punter traffic visiting Holbeck by exposing punters on Punter of the Week on social media and reporting them all to the police. I can't name them because it wouldn't be safe. They still live where this is happening. I'd like to thank Paula Brown from Save Our Eyes, Holbeck's residents group. I'd like to thank Councillor Sarah Field of Leeds City Council. Yeah. With her infamous line, "Men know what a woman is in Holbeck." I'd like to thank Northern Rad Fem Network, who supported my approach to targeting punters and published online photos of the punters of the week when other feminist groups fainted at the thought. I would like to thank another activist who is here, Julie F. from Northern Rad Fem Network, who provided a lot of emotional support for me on a very disturbing area of work. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for inviting me.